Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Jack Parrock and I'm delighted to do another live stream here. I'm doing it on Twitter and on YouTube and on LinkedIn as well. The idea of these live streams is to give a little bit of space to some stories that are happening specifically around EU politics, which is my speciality as a journalist. And today I wanted to focus really hard on one specific subject of a story that I've been covering extensively over the last few months, and that's Qatargate. It's a huge story. It's this corruption scandal that started back in December 2022 about a sitting vice president of the European Parliament, some other people that were related to her, former MEPs, her partner. And the question is, and the reason I'm doing this is to ask whether Eva Kaili, the MEP that was a vice president in the European Parliament, in the Socialists and Democrats groups, whether she should still be in prison 4 months after this case all broke out. There's a lot of discussion about this online. There's a lot of people saying she should be free. There's a lot of people that think, she was involved or she's alleged, accused to be involved in a corruption scandal, and that she should face the reality of the justice that needs to be served in a case like that, potentially, if she were to be convicted. Now, this is a really, really intricate, delicate case. It's really complex. And so I'm going to try and break it down throughout this live stream. I'm really happy to have people viewing and to be having a discussion about this. Please drop your comments into wherever you're watching, whether it's on YouTube or LinkedIn on Twitter. Please drop your comments into wherever you're watching it, and I can see them hopefully, and I can bring them up and I can take a look to see what you have to say. I'm totally self-opping this. I've totally operating all of the different things, so you'll see me looking down at my computer. I've recorded interviews that will play out during this broadcast, and some of them are one of them's in French, and so I've put the captions on there, so I hope that's useful. As I said, the intention with these live streams is to try and make this a place where we can have some sort of really big, expansive discussions, a place where the reporting that perhaps doesn't always get into the newspapers or on the TV channels that I work on, there's just a bit more space, a bit more scope to have a few discussions. I have a little dog who's just beside me, and he may bark over the next however long we do this stream for, maybe an hour total. So if you hear that's who it is. That's my puppy Teddy. So the way I've got this structured is we're going to hear from a legal expert who looks into pretrial detention here in Belgium. He's a Belgian lawyer, an expert in that. He's got some really, really interesting opinions about what it means to keep someone in pretrial detention, and also how judges use pretrial detention. We're also going to hear from Jean Quatremer, who is a veteran correspondent for Libération, which is a French publication, who's very, very vocal about his opposition to Eva Kaili remaining in prison. And then I'm going to speak to Effie Koutsa-Costa, who's a Euronews journalist and a Sky TV in Greece journalist here in Brussels, who can talk us through the sort of atmosphere, the temperature of what's going on with this story in Brussels. And then we're going to speak to Eleni Vaviciotti, who's a legend of Brussels reporting, but also Greece reporting. She's the FT correspondent at the moment in Athens. And she can bring us sort of the story of what's going on around Eva Kaili back in Greece. There's been a lot of news in Greece recently. So we're gonna have as much of a discussion as we possibly can to really thrash out those details. Now, to start with, though, what I wanted to do is just to outline some of the people that are involved in this scandal. I think one of the things we talk about these people a lot, and I think probably outside of Brussels, not too many people are actually aware of these people. It's a 2.6 million euro at least scandal that we know that's how much money is so far known by investigators. The investigations are obviously continuing. So in terms of sort of corruption scandals and stuff, it's actually not that big. This scandal is called Qatargate. But according to transcripts we've had of some of the main suspects, it also involves money that has come from Mauritania and also Morocco. In fact, according to them, it started in Morocco. But I'm just going to play you a short video of Eva Kaili, of her time in the European Parliament, just to give a little bit of a sense of kind of who she is. So
Eva Kaili.
Put that in there now so you can watch that.
1 minute.
Ευχαριστώ κύριε Πρόεδρε, κυρία Επίτροπε. Θα ήθελα να συγχαρώ όλους τους συζητητές για τη συνεργασία μας και το θετικό αποτέλεσμα της δουλειάς αυτής. And I will continue in English because I think it's very important to reject plenary amendments that wish to water down the requirements of the RFNBO sub-targets.
That's some boring EU speak, isn't it?
So, dear President, dear Vice President, dear colleagues, European businesses and governments every day need to deliver essential services to citizens in a safe and trusted manner.
This is her, and the
in
next
the face
speech
of increased exposure,
really
escalating cyber warfare campaigns fueled by geopolitical tensions and wars, but also mounting pressure of private and public entities to prevent, deter, and respond to such sophisticated threats. Today, the World Cup in Qatar is a proof, actually, of how sports diplomacy can achieve a historical transformation of a country, with reforms that inspired the Arab world. I alone said that Qatar is a front-runner in labor rights, abolishing kafala and reducing minimum wage, despite the challenges that even European companies are denying to enforce these laws. They committed to a vision by choice and they opened to the world. Still, some here are calling to discriminate them. They bully them and they accuse everyone that talks to them or engages of corruption. But still, they take their gas. Still, they have their companies profiting billions there. I've been lectured as a Greek, and I remind us all that we have thousands of deaths because of our failure for legal ways of migration in Europe. We can promote our values, but we don't have the moral right for lectures to get cheap media attention. And we do not impose our way. We respect them, even without LNG. They are a new generation of intelligent, high-educated people. They helped us to reduce the tension with Turkey. They helped us with Afghanistan to save activists, children, women. They helped us, and they are peace negotiators, they are good neighbors and partners. We can help each other to overcome the shortcomings. They achieved the impossible already. Thank you.
So that was that speech she gave in the European Parliament. And when this all broke out, when it was the Qatargate scandal where Qatari money was alleged to be coming through into European politics and into her pocket specifically is the allegation, that kind of speech that she gave, gleaming about Qatar, having great labor reforms, being a leader in the Arab state on those issues, that was one of the things that was really important and relevant to that. Now, she's the sort of main character of this show today. And so that's why I played that video. But she's not the only one. What we have now are two other people who have basically admitted, according to what we know, to actually running what was essentially a scam rather than a corruption ring. And one of them is Francesco Giorgi. And this Francesco Giorgi is the man that's in the picture with Eva Kaili there. He's 35 years old, and they have a child together, a 2-year-old child. Now, a few weeks ago, he was in prison back on December the 9th. And a few weeks ago, he was released on a tag. So he's free, but she remains in prison. But there's an allegation that perhaps because he has sort of admitted to his role in this, that perhaps he was then released. The other important person in this is Antonio Panzeri. He's an Italian, a former MEP. And this guy that's on there, you can see him speaking in the European Parliament. And essentially, they've both admitted that they went out to Morocco, Qatar, and Mauritania, essentially told them that they would be able to create some sort of situation where they can influence European lawmaking. And then they took sort of amounts of money from those states every time. You can see him here. He's in the European Parliament there next to Jamal Khashoggi's girlfriend. He was really sort of a human rights person, a sort of voice in that. And when he left in 2019, he then handed over his sort of position, according to the transcripts that I've seen anyway from the interviews with investigators, to Francesco Giorgi, that guy that you saw before. Panzeri remains in prison. He's still in Saint Gilles prison in Brussels, as is Eva Kaili. There was another guy who was an NGO head who was released without charge, who was arrested initially. Another MEP, Mark Tarabella, a Belgian socialist, he's in prison. And Andrea Cozzolino, an Italian, is under house arrest in Italy, related to the same charges as well. They were all named by Antonio Panzeri in that in the investigation that we've seen. Okay. So Eva Kaili is still in prison. She has a 2-year-old child. The question is, should she still be there? Should she, for the charges that are leveled at her, be in prison for the crimes that she's accused of committing? She's not committed, right? So there's in a democracy, there's innocent until proven guilty, but she remains in prison. So I'm just going to play you an interview with Philip Gaining, who is a Belgian legal expert on pre-trial detention. And I spoke to him. So some of these videos you'll see that I play out, I had to record somewhere else over the last few days. So this guy's a real expert, and he has some super, super interesting opinions about what pre-trial detention means in Belgium, and whether judges maybe use it as something of a punitive measure. This is an interview where there's questions back and forth from him. So I'll just play it out in its full now. Here we go.
I'm a lawyer in Belgium, a criminal lawyer, and I'm also doing research at the NICC, which is a part of the federal government justice department, who is doing research and specifically also on pretrial detention.
So you're an expert on pretrial detention. What are the conditions in Belgium for holding someone in detention before their trial starts?
Well, first of all, the decision has been made by an investigating judge. That is the judge who is in charge of the investigation. And the legislator thought that this would be the best person to decide whether it is still necessary to keep somebody in pretrial detention. Of course, there are criteria to which somebody can decide to pretrial detention, this judge. The first criterion is that there needs to be a danger for the public security. So that's one of the first criteria that needs to be met. Secondly, for most crimes, there needs to be either a danger of recidivism, of collusion, or there needs to be a flight risk. They don't need to be assembled together, all three, but one of the three is enough. These are basically the most important criteria that are discussed within court, whether it is still necessary to keep somebody in pretrial detention.
So in a case like Eva Kaili's, why is she still being held in prison?
First of all, the investigating judge has made a decision, and this decision is only valid for a period of time, 5 days actually. After these 5 days, another judge is deciding whether this pretrial detention is justified, and after a while, every month, or after 3 months, it's every 2 months, another judge needs to decide whether it is still necessary to keep somebody in pretrial detention. One of the most important elements in that discussion will be whether it is still necessary for the investigation to keep that person, the suspect, in pretrial detention indeed.
So in this case, one of the co-conspirators, Francesco Giorgi, who is Eva Kaili's partner, has been released. They're facing the same charges. How uncommon is it for one co-conspirator to be released and another one to be held in detention?
That is not that uncommon. So pretrial detention needs to be considered very individually. So it is very often the case that one suspect is released and another suspect is not released. It all depends on the focus of the investigation at that time. If it's no longer to keep one suspect in pretrial detention because of the state of the investigation at that moment, there's no problem. Actually, it's the opposite. The person needs to be released, but it's perfectly possible that another suspect has, for instance, another impact in this case or another role in this case considered by the investigating judge. So it is perfectly possible that that person is kept for a longer period.
In this specific case, though, Francesco Giorgi and Antonio Panzeri have sort of admitted to be the center of the scam. And Eva Kaili is just really accused by the looks of things of money laundering. which is unlikely to bring with it any actual prison time in Belgium. It feels very uncommon and very strange to a lot of people that she is being kept in prison.
Well, indeed, it might be that in the end, there will not be an imprisonment time as a sentence, but actually that is not something that is being taken into account by the judge who is judging the pretrial detention at this time. So to be very clear, the judge who is deciding about pretrial detention only has to look whether it is still necessary according to the law to keep that person in pretrial detention, regardless of a possible sentence or not. This has everything to do with the fact that we are, of course, still before the judgment. So the judge has a very difficult role to play here. He doesn't need to decide whether the sentence should be or would be imprisonment or not. He only has to look whether it is still necessary to keep that person in pretrial detention according to the law.
Is the system flawed to keep someone like Eva Kaili in prison, the Belgian pretrial detention system?
Well, the system in itself is not flawed, I think. There's a quite broad consensus about the fact that the legislation in Belgium is quite adequate, but there seems to be a shift in the application, in the practice of that same law. And that seems to be a problem indeed. We notice that the length of pretrial detention has increased over the years. And this is something that many judges and lawyers, of course, are worried about.
All of the prisons are massively oversubscribed in Belgium. Saint-Gilles prison, the prison guards are on strike all the time in Brussels.
Yes.
Shouldn't we change the system to give a bit more space? We're keeping a mother of a small child who's in relative terms, the amount of money that she's accused of embezzling and money laundering is actually quite small. Surely it would be better to have her out on a tag.
Yeah, well, this is the big paradox in Belgium. Is like actually the probably the cause of the overpopulation in prison is the fact that the sentences that are pronounced by the judges are not effectively well, how do you say that? They don't have to sit that time. So judges often, this is the feeling that we have as lawyers, is that actually they use pretrial detention to secure that in certain cases some suspect does actually see prison. But this is not something I can say about this case. That doesn't seem to be the case in this matter, because as you pointed out correctly, it's not sure whether the suspect will actually be condemned to a prison time. So in Belgium, if for a long time, people who were sentenced to 3 years imprisonment or less never had to see the inside of prison because the sentence was not executed in prison. For instance, it was executed with a bracelet with electronic monitoring. So if a judge wanted to had the idea that that person really needs to be sent to prison to see the inside of prison, he was obliged to sentence him with 3 years or more. So we see that well,
so judges, you think that judges in Belgium use pretrial detention as a punitive measure against some suspects even before they're convicted?
I'm absolutely certain of that, but I'm not sure whether this is actually happening in this case. I don't think that's what's happening here, but in general, this is basically the thing that we are claiming for, I think now 20 years. And most,
it's a huge problem in the justice system.
It is. It is, of course.
Okay, so there we go. I find that absolutely fascinating myself. That there's this accusation that judges might use pretrial detention to keep people in prison if they don't think they're going to be able to hand them a prison sentence after conviction. I mean, you know, we've actually got a comment that's come in from Communicare Digi on the live YouTube that says it's really amazing the time spent by Eva Kaili in jail. Not to go into the merits of the accusations, but is such a long preventative detention with a small child really worth it? You know, she is famous, Eva Kaili. She's well known all over the world. This is a very prominent scandal, and she remains, in prison. So one of the people that's been most vocal about this is Jean Quatremer. He's a correspondent for Libération. He's been tweeting out all the time about this. And I was like, do you know what? I want to speak to him. He speaks in French. You'll be so I'm going to play out the first clip of him and then the second bit with the interview where you're going to, unfortunately for you, hear me speaking French in that second bit. So stay tuned for that. But he has some really, really powerful opinions about the need for pretrial detention in cases like this and what these kind of crimes mean. So this is him. I'll just launch straight into that.
Quelqu'un, un criminel endurci, quelqu'un qui a un casier judiciaire extrêmement chargé pour mériter de passer autant de temps en prison. En réalité, non. Rien ne justifie sa détention. Il faut bien voir que la seule chose, c'est le délit qu'on lui reproche d'avoir commis, c'est ce qu'on appelle le blanchiment d'argent. C'est quoi le blanchiment d'argent? C'est le fait de détenir chez soi des sommes d'argent en liquide dont on ne peut pas expliquer la provenance. Or, ce délit, parce que c'est de ça qu'il s'agit, c'est un délit, c'est pas un crime, ce délit ne se traduit jamais par une peine de prison au final. Souvent, il y a de la prison qui est prononcée s'il y a un autre crime beaucoup plus grave qui a été commis. Trafic de drogue, terrorisme, trafic d'armes, trafic d'êtres humains. Là, en l'occurrence, on lui reproche absolument pas ça. Les affaires en Belgique, les affaires de blanchiment d'argent et éventuellement de corruption, s'il y a eu corruption, que l'argent, la somme d'argent qu'on a trouvée chez vous, c'est une petite partie de la somme d'argent, et donc sans doute que la maison que vous avez achetée, les meubles, les tableaux ont pu être achetés avec de l'argent sale, donc on vous confisque aussi une partie de votre patrimoine. Mais de la prison, jamais. Et d'ailleurs, on a un exemple récent, un ancien ministre belge qui s'appelle Serge Kubla, qui lui avait été accusé effectivement de blanchiment d'argent. La corruption avait été prévue. Il était ministre, hein, donc la corruption avait été prouvée. Il avait des comptes cachés dans les îles Caïmans, dans tous les paradis fiscaux, etc. Et savez-vous combien de temps il a passé en prison? 24 heures. Et il vient d'être condamné après 9 ans d'instruction à 2 ans et demi de prison avec sursis. Donc, pourquoi un ancien ministre n'a pas fait de prison alors que Eva Kaili est détenue depuis 4 mois? C'est incompréhensible.
So he's speaking, out, saying that basically they need to get her out. It's not fair that essentially a former minister that was accused of corruption here in Belgium was released after 24 hours and allowed out on bail to defend the case. There's this idea that collusion or a public menace, a public danger to society is the reason to keep people in pretrial detention. Now, I've reached out actually to the office of Michael Clays. He's the investigating judge who's responsible for keeping Eva Kaili in prison. Now, the office basically doesn't say anything. They haven't responded on many of these things. He says that any pretrial detention of any procedure is carried out in compliance with the Loi de 20 juillet 1990 relative to the preventative detention. They say that it's in line and that they're doing it. I'm going to show you because what I asked Jean Quatremer about next was Michael Clays, this judge, and why potentially he's doing this. And this is the man that's really he's quite a famous judge in Belgium. He's quite well known, and he's been the one that's decided to basically keep her in prison for all this time. And Jean Quatremer's got some pretty strong opinions about him and about why he's doing this. And I asked him about them. So I'll play out that next video now. And massive apologies for the real crime, which is me speaking French.
Le juge qui est chargé du dossier d'instruction, qui est une sorte de vedette en Belgique, il est juge d'instruction depuis très longtemps, il prend sa retraite à la fin de l'année, il a écrit beaucoup de romans policiers, c'est quelqu'un qui est très médiatique. Je crois qu'il a voulu faire un coup pour marquer la fin de sa carrière. Et je pense que, sans doute, peut-être au départ, il y a cru de bonne foi il allait mettre à jour un immense réseau de corruption au sein du Parlement européen. Or, on voit bien que 4 mois après le début de l'instruction, il n'y a strictement rien de nouveau sur cette affaire. Depuis le 9 décembre, donc on sait qui est impliqué, ce sont toujours les mêmes noms qui sortent, on sait vaguement quels sont les gens qui auraient versé cet argent, mais ça ressemble davantage, non pas une affaire de corruption, mais c'est plutôt, je dirais, une escroquerie montée par un ancien député européen qui répond au nom de Panzeri, un Italien, qui semble avoir convaincu des États tiers qu'ils pouvaient changer la politique de l'Union européenne, et ces États tiers se sont fait avoir. Mais je pense qu'il vraiment, peut-être de bonne foi, lui et la presse, parce qu'il a été poussé par la presse belge, qui tous les jours faisait des grands papiers, qui révélaient des éléments du dossier d'instruction dans les moindres détails. On avait l'impression que les journalistes belges étaient assis dans le bureau du juge d'instruction. Donc je pense que voilà, il s'est laissé dépasser, je dirais, par l'ampleur médiatique, d'abord belge, mais aussi internationale, parce que pendant un mois, on n'a parlé que de lui. Il a été interviewé dans tous les médias. En plus, c'est quelqu'un qui, après, je dirais, 40 ans de carrière, est très frustré, parce qu'il le dit lui-même, il l'a dit dans des interviews, et j'ai trouvé ces interviews totalement incroyables. Il a dit, vous comprenez, 95% de la délinquance financière échappe à la justice. Et, dit-il, quand on en attrape 5%, ben sur ces 5%, il faut taper très fort pour faire un exemple. Mais un exemple avec Eva Kaili, députée européenne, chez qui on a trouvé.
I'm just going to stop this here because what he's saying, Jean Quatremer, there is that what the judge is doing is trying to make an example of these sort of financial crimes because they have such a low hit rate in prosecuting them. And we're saying, you know, Eva Kaili is not necessarily the person that needs to be looked at in this sense. I think that's a really interesting aspect, like how much of this is about trying to make an example, show that the Belgian justice system can deal with a case like this. There's been many accusations that it's been struggling. Let's continue.
600 000 euros en liquide ou 700 000 euros. Mais c'est une vaste plaisanterie. C'est pas ça la délinquance financière internationale. La délinquance internationale, ce sont des milliards d'euros. Donc, ça va faire peur à qui? À un oligarque russe qu'on maintienne Eva Kaili en prison? Évidemment pas. Donc, je crois vraiment que là, au point de départ, il y avait peut-être, je pense, l'idée qu'il y avait un réseau. Maintenant, après 4 mois, on sait qu'il n'y a pas de réseau. Franchement, sinon les choses auraient déjà fuité. On saurait déjà qu'il y a quelque chose d'autre de beaucoup plus grave. Là, c'est une affaire, en français, on dit de branquignoles, c'est-à-dire, vous savez, de petits escrocs, de gens qui vous affirment qu'ils vont vous vendre un traitement contre le cancer, vous voyez, ce genre de choses. Et voilà, il y a des idiots qui l'ont cru. Rien de plus.
Et les autres, Francesco Giorgi, il est libre maintenant. Quelle est la différence entre les deux?
C'est absolument incroyable que Francesco Giorgi, donc, qui est son compagnon, qui est le père de sa petite fille, hein, parce qu'au départ, le juge a quand même emprisonné les 2 parents. Franchement, on ne le fait jamais, sauf évidemment dans les affaires de meurtre, de terrorisme, de trafic d'armes, etc., pour des crimes extrêmement graves. Mais pour un délit comme celui-là, blanchiment d'argent, on ne met pas les 2 parents en prison, la petite fille ayant 2 mois. En plus, le risque, 2 mois, pardon, je crois qu'elle avait 2 ans. Le risque que les 2 parents s'enfuient à l'étranger, détruisent des preuves, etc., il était proche de 0. Et une des conditions, en plus, essentielles pour mettre quelqu'un en détention préventive, c'est qu'il présente une menace pour la sécurité publique. Quelle était la menace que représentaient Eva Kaili et Giorgi à la sécurité publique? Aucune, vraiment aucune. Et alors, ce qui est incroyable, c'est qu'on sait qu'il y avait 2 personnes qui ont organisé ce système, donc aller convaincre des États étrangers, le Qatar, le Maroc, la Mauritanie, qui pourraient influencer d'autres députés. 2 personnes ont organisé ça, c'est Panzeri, qui est toujours en prison, et Giorgi, qui sont les 2 qui étaient, qui organisaient la chose. Jusqu'à preuve du contraire, Eva Kaili n'a fait que accueillir les coffres dans lesquels il y avait ces sommes d'argent. Donc, s'il y a bien quelqu'un qui devrait être en prison, c'est Giorgi. Et s'il y a bien quelqu'un qui devrait être libéré, c'est Eva Kaili. Et c'est l'inverse qu'a décidé le juge. Alors là, c'est incroyable. Mieux, le juge a décidé que Panzeri, donc le grand organisateur de cette escroquerie, bénéficierait du statut de repenti. Vous savez, c'est ce statut qui permet à quelqu'un qui regrette ses actes et qui va dénoncer donc ceux pour qui il a travaillé et qui vont lui permettre d'avoir une peine allégée. Mais le statut de repenti, c'est pour dénoncer le chef. C'est le petit qui va dénoncer le chef. Or là, c'est le chef qui va échapper à la prison et qui dénonce des gens qui sont en dessous de lui. Ça n'a jamais servi à ça, le statut de repenti. Donc ça veut dire que, Panzeri qui est organisé, lui, il va tout sortir et il ne fera pas de prison. Deux, celui qui a porté les valises et qui est sans doute je dirais le co-organisateur de cette escroquerie, celui sans qui Panzeri n'aurait rien pu faire. Je vous rappelle que Panzeri ne parle qu'italien. C'est la seule langue qu'il maîtrise. Ce qui veut dire que pour tous ses contacts avec les Marocains qui parlent français, avec les Qataris qui parlent anglais, avec les Mauritaniens qui parlent français, il devait passer par Géorgie. Donc libérer Géorgie et maintenir Eva Kaili en prison, mais c'est, franchement, je considère ça comme monstrueux. On ne prive pas une petite fille de 2 ans de sa mère pendant 4 mois sans aucune raison. Alors bon, le père au moins est libéré, c'est déjà ça.
So some strong opinions there, as you can see. My little puppy has wanted to join the stream. He was making a bit of noise. This is Teddy. So, we're going to move on. So as you can see, there's a lot of feeling that actually this detention of Eva Kaili is just not necessary and not important. Well, not important, but it's significant, and perhaps that the fact that she's continuing to claim her innocence, that is essentially why she's being kept in. Now, I'm delighted to be joined live by 2 people who are following this really intensively. And I can see Effie's up at NATO, classic. There's a big NATO ministers meeting today from Euronews. Hey, Effie, how you doing?
I'm fine. I'm very glad to see you even like that again.
Yeah, exactly. It's great. And also we've got Eleni from the FT in Athens. Are you in Athens right now, Eleni?
Yes, I am, Jack. Hi, Effie. Hi, Jack.
Hi, Eleni.
I really appreciate you guys. Like everyone that's joined this stream, it's a bit of a pet project of mine, and I'm really, really appreciative of everybody who's giving up their time to do this. And you guys know how much I respect and admire your work. I want to start with you, Effie. This case here in Brussels, the Belgian press are still on it a little bit, but is there a sense that Eva Kaili being in prison has just been forgotten?
I don't think that she's forgotten. And what I wanted to say, because I heard before what Jean Quatremer was saying about Eva Kaili and the other 2 suspects, Panzeri and Francesco Giorgi, I think the big difference here is first that the 2 Italians actually said that they are guilty. They are in this process, in this network. So they cooperated with the justice. And second, they are not now, they are not MEPs. They are not, let's say, superstars of the political scene in Brussels. What happens with Eva Kaili is that she insists she's innocent, something that Belgian justice apparently doesn't believe. And of course, that she is a vice president. She used to be a vice president of the European Parliament. So she is the big fish. She is the one that can have actually political influence, political impact inside in Brussels, inside the European Parliament, but also outside in third countries. So that's why I think what he said about her example, about her, being in prison for long, it is something for the Belgian justice. But of course, they cannot keep her forever, because we know that the trial is going to take place actually maybe in 2 years. So she cannot be in prison like this without new elements of this case to be, public. And I think that we see that it still makes headlines. It's the biggest political scandal in Brussels, at least in the last decade. So yes, I think that it's something that hits the interest of the people, hits the interest of the people also in Greece, which at the beginning, I think in Greece was a political scandal. Now it turned into a gossip story mainly.
Yeah, and that is a really, really interesting point. It's like I was saying at the beginning of this, it's like the glamorous, tech-savvy, forward-thinking, progressive, socialist vice president of the European Parliament. It's a real fall from grace for her. Eleni, what's going on with this story in Greece? Are people in Greece, because it was a huge story when it first broke, because of the party that she's a member of, PASOK, have had allegations of, verifiable corruption in the past. What's the current temperature around Eva Kaili and her detention in Greece right now?
As you mentioned, Jack, when the story first broke on the 11th of December 2022, it was a huge story. I mean, I think people would remember where they were when they heard about her being arrested, that kind of thing. And it was covered like day by day with huge extent and detail. But I have to say that checking now before our conversation, because I hadn't followed the story for quite some time, you see that the last entries, the last articles are like 3 weeks ago. I mean, the interest has completely died out.
Why is that? Because of the train crash? Because of the upcoming elections in Greece?
Also, but I mean, in our job, things like news have a certain period of life, life period. So I think since nothing is really happening at the moment, she's still in prison. What is interesting and people are questioning is how come she's still in prison when her partner and more involved, Francisco Giorgi, is out. So it's not something that you will go out in a party or you're gonna go on a dinner and people are gonna discuss about her. Maybe the question would be, what's happening with her? Is she still in prison? People have forgot about her. I don't think that's good for her case. But she's definitely not on the headlines and she's definitely not in the minds of Greeks at the moment.
Yeah, it's really interesting because meanwhile she has a two-year-old child. I mean, it's been 4 months. That child could have turned 3 already by now. I don't know the exact sort of birth date. I mean, it's quite heavy though. Is there any sympathy towards her in Greece, Eleni?
I mean, the child, of course, creates sympathy. She has a very young child, as you mentioned. But I think what was the predominant feeling here, and maybe Effie can confirm or not with what I'm saying, is that this woman had it all ahead of her. She was successful. She had a great career ahead of her. She had a great salary. She had just had a baby. She was very pretty. I mean, she had the whole package, as we call it here. The next steps were, the world was her oyster. She could become a minister here. She could become a commissioner. She could become anything she wanted. And she ruined this future, if she's proven guilty, of course, from greed or from, things that she already had,
Yeah. I mean, that was the surprise. She was such a rising star. She's like a perfect MEP in Brussels,
Yeah.
She was glamorous. She could speak English well. She was turned up. She had like very good looking people in her team whenever I met her. I have a bit of a story. I have a bit of a story with her personally where she turned up late to a live interview I was meant to be doing on Euronews. Every night we used to do this 7 p.m. Bridge. It was called The Bridge, and we had to do an interview. She was a live TV presenter herself, and she turned up like 15 minutes late for me and was like, she was like, "Can we do it now?" I was like, "No, it's live TV, it's news."
I mean, she was very people. I mean, she was exactly like you said. She was a rising star. She was the EU rising star, and her political future was wide open. She could have done anything she wanted. I don't know if that's the case now. Even if she's proven non-guilty, I don't know if she will be able to clear her name and be back in the political scene.
It'd be so difficult now, unless there's a huge turn of support for her, which happens sometimes in these cases. And perhaps that what might be happening, sort of public opinion is swaying perhaps in her favor. Just like, why is this woman still in prison when she's not like a violent criminal or anything? Effie, what do you know about the current status of her legal case? She changed her legal team, right?
Yeah, right.
To quite a famous person. What can you tell us about that? I'm going to bring a picture of him up actually while we're here.
Yeah, actually, what we know is that she keeps, of course, her Greek lawyer, Michalis Dendrakopoulos, and now we see the lawyer that she hired just 1 month ago. It's Sven Marie. It's a Belgian, let's say, lawyer who is very famous in Belgium for the cases that he actually took over. He was the one who defended terrorists he has a huge, fame, and here in Brussels, not always good. And last time that Eva Kaili asked and made the request to be released again, it was only her Greek lawyer that appeared in the court, because he was not in Brussels. And there were, rumors around, journalists like speaking about this kind of stuff, especially Belgians were telling us that there were rumors that he's somewhere in the North Pole for a reality show, a Belgian reality show. Of course, it was not confirmed, but we haven't seen him since then, since the first time that he appeared in the court. Now we know.
Let me stop you there, yes. Because I emailed his office and he replied to me specifically about this, because I knew you wanted to talk. I said to him, "Is it true?" Because I said to him, "Hey, I'm doing a live stream on this. Can I please get some information, some answers to some questions?" He said, "Sorry, I'm on holiday." And I said, "Is it true that you're doing a TV show in the Arctic right now?" And he said, "No, that was weeks ago. He's on holiday."
So he did it.
So he did it.
By the looks of things, yeah. He was.
So it's confirmed that he did it.
He is a celebrity in Belgium, right? He defended Salah Abdeslam, and it's quite weird. Like you said, he is this very punchy, very sort of bombastic out there lawyer. Everyone knows him, but he's not really brought that to her legal case so far, I think.
Not so far. I think he appeared just once. Now, of course, we are waiting to see if he will appear next time on the 13th of April, that the next request for her release will be again examined in front of the court. I hope I see you there. So let's see if he will be with us this time to defend her client. And for all of us, I think what was surprising and quite striking was actually, he is a lawyer defending like terrorists. The previous one, Mr. Rizopoulos, was famous for defending cases of fiscal fraud, of economic crime, this kind of cases that are actually similar to what Eva Kaili is trying to say to the court. Now we see that she hired a lawyer that he's actually a lawyer of heavy crime. I don't know why. I don't know why she did that. Maybe to hit the interest on her case. Maybe because he knows very well the Belgian justice system. And we see if he will finally do something, succeed, something that his predecessor didn't. But her Greek lawyer, Michalis Dimitrakopoulos, remains in the case from the beginning. And he will be here, as far as we know, in Brussels over the coming days.
Yeah, so I've heard rumors as well that the investigators that are doing this in Belgium are actually struggling with this case. They don't understand necessarily the workings of the European Parliament. This is a classic thing. Brussels, the EU world, is a totally different thing to sort of Belgian justice, which is trying to do this in Belgian law when it's related to the committees and the delegations and
committees, subcommittees, human
resolutions and motions, and what does it mean and how does it work? And I don't even necessarily blame them for this. And I'm not sure Sven Marie necessarily, that guy that's now defending her, is necessarily someone that knows about that. My understanding was that he would then try and make a powerful sort of impression, but we haven't heard that much.
It is a statement.
And also to bring a bit of star power. Eleni, please.
No, sorry. The rumor in Greece was also that Dimitrakopoulos, her Greek lawyer, wasn't really, didn't have a great collaboration with her previous lawyer, and they were looking for a new one for quite some time. So I think her Greek lawyer is really close to her and is playing a very key role on how they're gonna, line they're gonna take and how they're gonna deal with the media.
I think the previous lawyer, Mr. Rizopoulos, was telling her to actually collaborate with the justice to say what she knows, while Mr. Dimitrakopoulos was telling her to insist that she's innocent and she will insist to clear her name in that case. So I think this was the red line, let's say, between them.
Yeah, they had different opinions on how they should proceed with the case.
Yeah, and there's so much confusion about this, and this is what happened. So I found out that Panzeri and Georgi were in the same cell in Saint Gilles prison at the beginning when they were accused of, colluding on a corruption scandal. There's been a lot of cross wires and cross lines, and a lot of questions about why this case is moving forward in the way it is. I know you guys are, responsible independent journalists, but do you think that she should still be in prison? Do you have an opinion on it? Or do you have an opinion on sort of the overwhelming sense of what people you talk about this, whether she should be in prison?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question, I would say. Opinion, if she has to stay in prison, I think the justice and, the authorities know much better than we do what they have in their hands. If they have things that really make them, keep Eva Kaili in prison, if they believe that she's a suspect of, flying away, escaping or whatever, I mean, it's a justice. Who am I to say?
Yeah, you're right. Who are us to say? But I think the tampering of evidence is something more to consider than maybe her flying away because she has a kid. I think it would be hard for her. And if she would be out, she would be with a bracelet, right? She wouldn't be out doing whatever she wanted.
She's not going to be able to rock up to a beach in Mykonos. Everyone's going to know her.
No, that's true. Exactly.
No.
But I think the tampering of evidence and I don't know if there is something related to accounts, to crypto accounts, to, I don't know, things like that.
But normally those things, in my understanding of criminal justice issues, when they investigate these things, you've got like 24 hours when an investigation starts. That if you are the perpetrator of a crime, you've got to immediately destroy that evidence. Otherwise, the authorities get it relatively quickly. That's my understanding, and from a lot of people I've spoken to. You don't need to keep people in prison for months in order to prevent them from doing that.
Elena, I don't know if there is, sorry to interrupt you,
Please.
But unless there is, an ongoing process or other people outside that they are, under investigation, so they are afraid that maybe Eva Kaili could come, could contact them or whatever. So maybe this would be a reason to keep her in prison until they close the case, they close the investigation, they arrest all the people involved in this case. Maybe this would be an explanation why they still keep her in prison.
Do either of you have any information about how she's doing?
Yes, I do. She's not doing well. She's in a hard situation. She really has trouble with the kid, that she has such a little time with her daughter. Although she's allowed to see the kid every single day, but for I think an hour and a half or 2 hours, I don't want to be mistaken, she chooses not to do so because it's with all the other inmates at the same room until the kid arrives. I think it's 1 hour. Till the kid arrives, it has to leave, and this is very stressful for the kid. So she prefers to do the twice a month visit, which is one-on-one, and she has like 2-3 hours with the kid alone. And I think she's kind of disheartened that people are not talking about her anymore, that she's kind of, forgotten. But I think she studies a lot, and she's doing some communal work in the prison. She's taking part of the communal services, like cleaning and stuff. I think you need to be busy, to keep yourself busy, because otherwise you can go mad, right? Being in a prison from the life she had, ending up in a cell. I mean,
my experience with people that are in prison as well, especially in Belgium, is that it's really, really unpleasant. It's really difficult. There's not much outdoor time. It's not these kind of fun, activities and educational stuff. You just sit in a cell, you get an hour in a yard. It's pretty difficult. You perhaps have a job. And like you say, especially for a woman who's sort of, swum through the corridors of power in Brussels to be sunk right down into, mundane, difficult prison life. It's a tough thing mentally. I want to stay with you, Eleni, actually. Have you guys both got a few more minutes for me?
Sure.
If you need to go, you can just say it, and you can go back. But the thing I want to talk to you, Eleni, about is the elections coming in Greece in May, right? So the PASOK party, of which she's a member, has been sort of marred with corruption scandals in the past. Is this scandal going to affect them in these upcoming national elections?
I mean, it did affect them at the beginning when the scandal broke, but the head of the party, Nikos Androulakis, who is also an MEP, he very quickly distanced himself from Kaili. He immediately took her off the party. He said that he had nothing to do with her. He said repeatedly that he was for months thinking to take her out of the party after the scandal, the wiretapping scandal broke in Greece. That was back in August, and he thought that she did not support him enough in the European Parliament. She was in the committee that was investigating the Pegasus committee, the PEGA committee, and he thought that she was not supportive enough. So I think in that sense, he has, if you can also give her opinion, I think he has tried and in some extent managed to distance himself from her. On the other hand, when the scandal broke, I think there was an effect on the polls on how PASOK was doing, because, okay, she was an MEP for the party. It's a big scandal. It cannot not affect the party, of course. But because now, we are in April, as we mentioned, there's no much talk about her. I don't think, that's my impression, I don't think that the PASOK voter is going to consider casting his ballot, before casting his ballot and say, oh, Eva Kaili is in prison for these charges, maybe I should not vote for PASOK. I don't think that will be so much in the minds of voters.
It's really when it comes to voting, isn't it? Your sort of traditional party alliances stay with you. I mean, how many of the major parties all over Europe have people that scandals not there? But Effie, what about sort of Brussels politics? I mean, dare I say it, we're coming up to sort of the idea that elections are going to come in 2024.
Yes,
what's happening in the European Parliament?
I think this is a scandal that really hit the European Parliament, and mainly the political group that Eva Kaili is belonging to. It's the Socialists and Democrats, because all the people actually involved, or the names of people floating around that they were somehow involved in this network, are coming from the Socialists and Democrats. And there is a huge crisis in this political party. I mean, I've been in Strasbourg in the plenary like the last time after the scandal broke 3 times, and I think all the people still talk about it, still talk about how they will manage to handle this crisis, even with Nikos Androulakis, even with Iratxe Garcia. I remember that what Nikos Androulakis was telling me when the scandal broke is that actually it was because of Iratxe Garcia and the promise that he gave her. The reason why Eva Kaili remained at the party of PASOK, because she was a vice president of the Socialists and Democrats. So I think they are in much trouble in the European Parliament, and especially in the political group of the Socialists and Democrats. We know that at the beginning everybody was a bit, shocked, and they were waiting for other parties to be also targeted. But we haven't seen that so far. So I think the huge crisis is at the moment limited inside the political group of the Socialists and Democrats.
Yeah,
I think it will all boil down to what will happen the next months, if she's going to be released, if they have further evidence, because it was a huge scandal when it broke. It has died out, and it really depends on what the investigators are going to bring to the table.
I think whatever it happens, in the future, even if she's released, I think the scandal has really damaged the image of the S&D group, the Socialists and Democrats. Whatever it happens, we know that there is a former MEP, Pier Antonio Panzeri, who made this network and actually got with him some, assistants of MEPs or other people working in the European Parliament on board. And the
let me stop you there, Effie. Do you guys consider this a corruption ring or a scam that Panzeri and Georgi were using to earn some cash for themselves?
I would go with option A. I think it's much wider.
Me too.
You think it's wider? Yeah. And you think there's other countries and other MEPs involved still?
Oh yeah.
I think so, but that's my impression. I don't definitely have evidence. Of course, we would have written about it if we had, but that's the impression that they have, that it was a much wider thing than 3 people involved, 3-4 people.
Yeah,
it is. And there you see what has been revealed over the last months with this scandal is some gray zones, some kind of things happening in the European Parliament, and nobody cares. There is no monitoring group to see how they are working. So even last time I've been in the European Parliament in Strasbourg, you could see like lobbyists coming from Qatar again and being around. They were there. There were MPs like shouting, "What are you doing here?" But in the end, they're still coming from Qatar and from other countries.
But there's lobbying from everywhere all the time in the European Parliament, all over Brussels, all over major political cities. That happens all the time. There's big questions. That's a whole nother discussion, though, about the lobbying in the European Parliament. Listen, guys, I really, really appreciate your insights. You're both two of the people that know this story inside out. And I think it's interesting to talk about these things when stories get forgotten. So, Eleni, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
Really appreciate it. I hope to see you in person soon.
Nice to see you.
Effie as well. Thanks so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Good luck with the rest of your day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So that was awesome to have those two on, Effie and Eleni. They're properly, brilliant journalists who are following this story inside out. What's your opinion? I mean, do you think that Eva Kaili should still be in prison after everything we've heard? Should she now be released? Is it necessary for her to be in prison? Drop a comment or a message or a question. If you're watching this later after the live's finished, still continue to drop the questions. I'll read everything. And I want to try and sort of use this platform as a way of having these discussions for things that I'm personally interested in, because I think this case is, like Eleni said, it's kind of fallen off the radar, but it doesn't mean that it's not important. It doesn't mean that it's not significant. There is a suggestion that it could go further. So please drop the comments. Please like and share the video, or subscribe on the YouTube channel as well if you're willing to. And another thing as well, as I've been telling sort of friends and people like that I have been doing this little project of mine, these live streams, people have been suggesting that I need to have a proper name for it. So if this goes well, and if people are interested, it'd be cool to have your suggestions of what I should perhaps call these shows that I'm going to do. The idea is to start on the Qatar story. It's something I've been fascinated in. But also, I think it's also cool for me as a journalist in Brussels, a video-orientated journalist, to have a platform where I can use, go long on stories rather than perhaps have shorter space in some of the more traditional media formats. So I'm really, really excited. I will continue to do this. As I say, please like, follow, subscribe, whatever. I really respect these YouTubers that do this all the time, because I've put this whole thing together myself, and it has been a very arduous project, but I'm delighted to have done it. And I really appreciate everyone that's watched. Thanks so much for being with me. And yeah, look out for the next broadcast. Take it steady.